This is WCM's Park Update, a weekly show covering the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. During each episode, you'll hear from special guests and campground experts on topics that will help your park flourish. WCM's Park Update is a production of Woodall's Campground magazine.
Hi, welcome to another edition of WCM's Park Update, sponsored by Midwest Electric Products. And I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground magazine. And you'll notice somebody different. Mike Gast decided to take a little bit of a break. And our guest today is John DePietro. And John is familiar to most people because he has another competing show, I guess. I don't know if it's competing, but RVing in New England every Wednesday night for an hour, and him and Bob Zagami talk all things RV industry and camping, and you guys do quite a bit on that show. So it's great to have you here, and hopefully I don't treat you too bad. Mike always says that I'm a slave driver. So, and our guest today is Christine Taylor, and she is principal partner at the Towney Law Firm based in Albany, New York. And I probably say that differently than people say it in New York. So that's how you know I'm not in New York. I'm in Michigan. So I love hearing Christine talk at all the different conferences she goes to. She probably goes to more than I do. And it's great to have you here, Christine. So I almost said Chrissy because your name is Chrissy on the screen.
Well, you're allowed to use either. I mean, Christine's my legal name, but people who've known me for a while call me Chrissy, so either is fine. And you're right about Albany. We say Albany in New York. Albany. Whereas if you're talking about the Georgia one, that is Albany. So
that is Albany. Oh. So I didn't even realize. I guess I should have realized there was two different ones. So I didn't even think about that. But it's great to have you here. You and your mom, Kathy, you purchased the campground last year. It was a different name. Wasn't it like Nickelback or something?
Yeah, the band. No, it was Nickerson's. It was a privately owned, but we did franchise with KOA over the winter. So this is our first season currently. We're in it as a KOA again.
Yeah, so you joined the yellow group, and now it's called the Catskill Mountains Gilboa KOA Holiday.
Yeah, I did it.
Yeah, and you're sort of in the Catskills.
We're kind of the northern end. We're about an hour southwest of Albany, would be how I describe it.
So you're an attorney, and you work full-time at a law firm, and you decided, what else can I do? You have a son, and soon to have a second child, but you decided, what else can I do to make my day busier, I guess? So.
Yeah, well, it's a very weekend-focused business, so I guess it's cool. No, it's what we've done since I was a kid, right? And it's what my practice area is in. And I say now I get to try things out in real time because instead of, me advising people and asking how it played out, I do it and then I go, oh, that didn't go so well. Maybe we don't do that next time. So that's been actually nice, at least in New York, to test out some of the laws in New York and be like, what can I get away with and so forth.
So I guess one of the things that I thought was interesting that you wrote about here recently was the background checks. And you wrote a pretty good column for Woodall's on, what people need to think about on the federal side and even on the state side, because there's state specific laws that they might need to look into. I guess, is that something that you've had to deal with at your own park?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to be fair, if I go back several years and several campgrounds ago, since this is our fourth one, we did a background check back in the day. We did it. It's something that people have more started doing more frequently now as we go. And frankly, it's because, camping and employment, we've attracted different people that used to not be in our kind of industry. And knowledge is kind of power. And we found during all of these things that you have a duty to provide a safe environment both to your guests and to your other employees. And background checks is one of those ways to hopefully kind of short circuit that process for you. Most campgrounds are not housing. I say that with the caveat that some people tread a little bit too much into mobile home park territory, in which case the background checks for your long-term guests or seasonals aren't as strict as some like a housing would be for those kind of requirements that you're supposed to jump through. Employees are very strict, because in most states, if you're going to deny somebody because of their background check, it has to be relevant to the position that they're applying for. So that means that, like, very obviously, if they were going to do accounting for me and that they had a criminal conviction for embezzlement, I could be like, no, thank you. But if it was something, different, that they had a DUI, but they weren't going to be driving anything for me, it might be a little harder for me to say that I could reject them for that reason. So you do kind of open the door to those additional problems if you're background checking and how you reject somebody, versus if I didn't know any of that and I just decided we weren't a good fit, then I don't think you should be here, just because you and I don't seem personality wise. I could be like, never mind, no job for you. So
Christine, you really have two separate avenues that you're looking at with background checks. One, you said a background check for a long-term resident, for a seasonal person, which is totally different than for an employee.
Correct.
Okay.
So
go ahead, Ben.
Nope, go ahead.
The issue is, what are the criteria that you can reject someone without dealing with discrimination?
Sure. So, it generally,
as far as the resident is concerned.
Yeah. So the thing is, I guess that's where the words matter in my profession. So I try very carefully to not call any of these people residents. Anybody that we have at our park, for example, we're only open May through October, so it should be pretty transparent that they could not live there. But I do not call them residents. They're merely licensees or seasonal guests. They're never residences. They don't live there. And because it is not housing, I can skirt free of a lot of the housing laws, especially in New York State. We'll just stick with New York for right now because that's where my campground is. It's very clear that if I'm not housing, then almost all of these laws that apply to landlord tenants do not apply to me in any shape, way, or form. If I'm open year round and I let that person stay in a mobile home on my property and they don't have another home to go to, I don't care if I call myself a campground. I am that person's home and they are now a resident. I suddenly have kicked in all of these landlord tenant things that I don't want to do. So if they're not a tenant, then I'm pretty clear to kind of remove them for anything. I shouldn't blatantly do something discriminatory. You're not supposed to have a business that, like, I only let females camp here. Like, those aren't things that we should be doing. There's some discriminatory piece there, but I can generally just say it's not a good fit and, not have them. The discrimination piece I'd be worried about is if I am background checking, I have to background check everyone. So I can't decide that I'm only going to background check males and give females a pass on a background check. Okay. I would have to background check everybody in, of that type. So every seasonal guest would have to be background checked.
A campground owner in the northern tier, which is generally seasonal, would have really a different set of issues to deal with if they owned a park or also owned a park. I can think of some small chains that have properties up north in Maine, but also have them all the way down into Georgia. They've got a whole different set of circumstances for their seasonal people.
Well, yeah, and I mean, to be fair, some of that is business models. So there are some parks in the Northeast who do enjoy being open year-round. And I've had a conversation with a lot of them to ask if the income that they are getting in every month is worth the protections that they're giving up. So I guess 5 years ago now, I had a case in Massachusetts, and the reason the judge determined that we were correct and it wasn't housing is because the campground closed for 1 month of the year. They were only open 11 months. And because we were not open 12 months, there was no way we could be housing because we closed for 1. So I do tell people to, like, think very carefully, like, do I make enough money in January that it wouldn't be better for me to just close? So that's something to think about. In the South, some of that is just what they're trying to attract. So mobile workers are a really big thing, especially if you're like in an oil area or the traveling nurse now. There's a lot of mobile workers who don't really have a house anymore. So how long you let people be on your property, you start thinking about business considerations. So in some areas, even if we get all the way down to the town or municipality we in, they have triggering what I would call days. Like, oh, once they're there past 14 days, we automatically give them tenant protection. Oh, once they're there past 28 days. And it's up to the businesses individually to decide if the added grief in removing that person is worth the, money that they're getting in by letting them stay past those time periods. So I say that legal is just one of many line items, and you have to kind of weigh it against the economic reality, and maybe it's worth it to me to perhaps have to go through the landlord tenant eviction process because I make so much money on this type of people that I'm willing to do that. So that's
Yeah.
Do you go to a housing court for that?
And
yeah, you do. Every state's different. So Massachusetts has specific housing courts, for example. That's a good one to look at. In New York, we go to whatever town/city court that we're in. So like the same court that would see traffic tickets would do evictions. City of Albany. So if I'm evicting a tenant in the city of Albany, or if I got a speeding ticket, I'm going to the same city of Albany court. That would be a way to think of it.
and the third party background check companies don't help people navigate some of those rules and stuff.
They help you at the initial. So
Okay.
to get a background check from anybody, you need consent, a written consent usually, and that they're pretty good at getting at the upfront. They don't generally advise you on what you can do with that information or the notices
Okay.
you're supposed to give, because very obviously they don't want the liability of you doing it incorrectly. So if they say hands off, then it's not their problem.
I guess just looking a little bit at your park, how's the season been so far this year? Has it been pretty busy?
Way better.
Way better?
Yeah, it's been good. The part of the benefit of being part of a franchise, and we've been at KOA 3 times. The very first time we were a Yogi, is that you pull in a different set of customers than you would have naturally. So as
Yeah.
soon as we became part of the KOA website, we got people who camped at KOAs who never knew we existed beforehand. They might have only lived 45 minutes away, but because they only camped at KOAs, they never knew. So, it was beneficial in the sense that we wanted to have, to get some new people to know who we are and what's happening. And joining a franchise is one of the quickest ways to approach a new group of people. So it's been really helpful for that, to be like, hey, you people who've never heard of us before, now because they happen to camp KOAs, they've heard of us. So it was really beneficial from that perspective. I think in general, just kind of as you've heard through a lot of people this summer, the lead time on reservations is a lot shorter than I'm used to. So as someone who was out of the day-to-day for a while and then got back into it the last 2 years, before people would book like months in advance, and now I think we're a month, a couple weeks in advance instead of really far out like they used to be. I mean, yes, the holiday weekends still book up kind of quickly, but your non-holidays are not booking as far in advance as they used to. So for me, who likes to put our rec programs and help with that kind of stuff together, it has changed the way we're doing things. I wait more last minute in things than I would like, because we don't really have good numbers until closer to the arrival date for some of those things.
Do you think that's because people are waiting on economic factors for trip planning, or is it just because they've decided to be a lot more spontaneous?
Or weather-wise?
Definitely spontaneity. No, I definitely think it's economic. I mean, some of it's reflective in my own life, right? Like there are things that I would love to spend money on that I'm waiting to see what happens. Is the price gonna change? Is this gonna be different? So forth. Do I have the extra funds? I don't have to camp. Or, maybe I'll wait and do something else, then spend that money. So I think a lot of it is economic based in the sense that people don't feel comforted by their situations anymore. I think, unfortunately, there's been a lot of layoffs in a lot of industries, and people don't know how much money they should be saving. And the cost of just general need to live items has gone up. Like, look at, everyone shares all those posts about how food over the last 2 years, right? It's like tripled in price. So I think, you start trimming the things that are non-necessities. And, I think that especially for transient guests, is one of the ones that have delayed them. Now, conversely, I think it has brought more people to consider being a seasonal, because then you know what that's going to cost for your entire summer. You budgeted for that. You get back some of the gas costs and things like that because you're not towing. So I think it has caused an increase in some long-term guests, people converting to being long-term guests who weren't beforehand,
Yeah.
because it takes away some of that economic uncertainty for them.
Okay. Well, yeah, definitely. Well, we're going to take a break, recognize our sponsor, Midwest Electric Products, and we'll be back in a minute with Christine. Hi, welcome back to WCM's Park Update, and we are talking with Christine Taylor, a principal partner at the Towney Law Firm in Albany, New York. And I don't want to make Kate mad at me, so I got to make sure I say it correctly, else Kate will get mad at me. So it's always great to have Christine on, and I guess when you're looking at the camping industry, do you feel like, you mentioned before the break how people were really into the industry after COVID, they wanted to get outdoors. And I think people to some degree still want to get outdoors, but is camping kind of wearing out for some of these people? Or are they trying different things to get outdoors, I guess?
Yeah, I think that some people bought into it during 2020 and have totally put themselves in it. And I
Yeah.
think that some people, when other options came back, realized that wasn't really for them. But what I have seen a lot more is the demand, perhaps it's ever increasing, for Wi-Fi and connectivity, because I think the remote work part is the leftover piece from COVID. So, I have a coworker who camps at my campground, and she leaves early. I think she's walking out the door any minute now, because she finishes her day at the campground. She gets there early,
Okay.
works remotely, and finishes it. So I think that the demand for services has changed a little bit in the sense that if you can offer a way for people to work remotely, they'll stay at your property more because they can. My husband's job is fully remote. He doesn't go to an office, so he can work from anywhere. And I think we have a lot of those now. So if you can support them, I think that they'll spend more time at your campground.
Yeah. Hey, Christine,
But,
when
yeah,
we
go ahead.
started talking on this segment, we were talking about background checks for employees. And, we're in the middle of a presidential campaign right now, and one candidate is saying that they'll provide jobs. The other one is saying that we've already provided jobs. The other one's saying, yeah, but they're old jobs that came back from COVID, et cetera, et cetera. But I was at a campground, a large campground, a 750 site campground last week, and family run, not a chain. And they had several J1 workers,
Immigration.
people coming from other countries. Do they provide different challenges for getting background checks as opposed to the neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean they do, but they have essentially, since you're bringing them in on a visa, so they have to pass governmental background checks to be allowed into our country in the first place. So I'd almost say don't waste your time on the standard background check for them because the government kind of did your job for you for them to get here in the first place. So
Already done
you
so.
know, yeah, you're running through the immigration thing. It is hard to get those seasonal worker visas, though. It's a lotto. So if we actually have an immigration attorney here. It's something that I've been suggesting. During the pandemic. We got rid of like all those visas. We put a hiatus on them. So now they've finally come back. But there is a lotto. So if you're thinking about hiring those type of people for next summer, then you have to be prepared to start filing that paperwork at the end of this summer. Like you need to be ready to go like September to start filing for them in hopes of getting, in on that lotto. So summer camps and amusement parks use them a heck of a lot. So I think campgrounds should utilize them for seasonal businesses. But it is just a temporary worker visa. So, getting that person back more than one summer is probably unlikely as well. So you have to be kind of on board for that too.
You get to choose the country that they're coming from?
Yeah, it could be anybody. A lot of these type of things have pipelines. So if we pick another thing, let's say, I don't know, nursing, right? Sometimes they need extra nurses or something from somewhere. There might be like an organization in, I don't know, Guatemala that's like Guatemalan nurses, and then they will vet a bunch of people and take them in. And then if the employer wants them, the employer, sponsors them through that visa process. So it can be from anywhere. For those temporary ones, you just have to, prove a need and some other stipulations such that they'll grant you the visa. And again, be one of the lucky people who gets it. There's a limited number of them for the entire country, so you have to be one of those early filings to make sure you get one of those.
The reason I asked that question is a couple of years ago on Cape Cod, which is a big tourist area,
Sure.
and it's gotten to the point where where college kids used to come there, but they can't afford the housing, so they bring in the people and then provide housing for them. But they had a circumstance where one particular company brought workers in from 2 or 3 separate countries, but when they put them together to work in the same areas, the countries that they came from were fighting with each other because back home the countries were fighting with each other, and it seemed to the next year that guy said, "Wait a minute, I can't have anybody from this country if somebody from this country is coming." They're all countries that used to be part of Yugoslavia before it all broke up, and whether they're religious or not. But the whole point is, you couldn't put those workers together because of their national
I
background.
mean, to be fair, you're going to run into problems regardless, especially if you're housing your workers,
Right.
Because then it is more like a college. I mean, it's college dorm room again, right? Like people who have to live and work together. I always said, I mean, in a way, it's like family workers, right? I always said the worst part of working with your family is you can't go home and complain about your boss. Like I can go home now and be like, work sucks, husband, and that's totally fine. But when I worked under my parents and I was like, my boss sucks, that's still my mom. So like not a thing that you can do. So I think the living and working together just itself is kind of an issue. But yeah, I mean, that's the way a lot of people are supplementing their seasonal workers now, is offering housing. I mean, we did that already through work campers. So this is just another kind of variation on a theme.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things too, because we've had discussions on the show about hiring and J1 students. The other important thing for park owners to know about J1 is that you typically have to have a pretty good training program, because I think like what Christine mentioned, usually you can't get the same people back year after year. It depends on their situation. And then, you're talking about people with potential like language barriers. What are, if you have a really good English speaking person, then maybe they would work pretty well in the front office. If they don't have very good English skills, then maybe, maintenance or somewhere where they don't interact as much with campers might be a better role for them.
That's
so just finding out, learning how they're, learning what they're good at, and understanding what they're good at is important. I mean, the one thing, with campground owners that have successful programs, they love how dedicated they are to working. And then obviously a lot of them have housing on the park and they're just available anytime. So I think they really love that perspective.
Can't be late for work.
You do have to, and Christine, refresh my memory, don't you have to give them a certain amount of time off too to be able to do things in the country if they're on there?
There's a lot of requirements for these visas, but that's also what I said. There's a lot of requirements to even get them there in the first place. So you have to be willing to jump through some governmental hoops. But since people have problems with hiring in general, to a lot of people, that's worth it.
So what at your park? I know you guys have done a lot of work at your park, and I imagine there's still a lot of work to do. I think park owners are never done doing things. I guess what are some of the trends you're noticing maybe at your park or just in the industry in general? What are campers looking for as far as like amenities? I know Wi-Fi is always a big one, but I guess maybe even more on the recreational side. What are things people are looking for?
So this is an interesting one to ask us. So if you ask a lot of campground owners, they say planned activities are dying and they don't do as much as they used to. But we've never subscribed to that. So we've always done a lot of activities and we have got a ton of engagement. And we actually, some of our theme weekends, people have liked so much that it took a weekend like last weekend that would have been kind of a nothing weekend for camping in general, and brought a lot of people to the park because they were interested in the theme and the activities we did around it. But if your heart's not in it, I think that's where the miss is. So I like theme weekends. I like planning a schedule around it. I like wearing stupid costumes. We have staff that all subscribes to the same kind of idea, and people totally come. But if you're a person who's like, I'm doing this because this is what I'm told that I have to do, then your
Yeah.
guest is going to read that, and you really should nix it. It's not worth your money to do that. Bingo is
Christine,
back with a vengeance.
Yeah, it is.
So, that's a
Yeah.
big one for everyone. But
Christine, do you
I
dress
think
up
I think
for Halloween?
oh yeah, absolutely. I still have a box of costumes from our previous 3 campgrounds. I've got all sorts of theme weekend attire. It's one of my favorite parts.
So if Ben
I
comes
think
out to visit you, you're going to make him wear an outfit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's
Get
Western
ready, Ben.
weekend this weekend. It's our rodeo weekend. So.
Oh, rodeo.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about the activities programming too is it attracts people that you might want at your park. So like if you're trying to be family friendly, I think once people understand, oh, they do a lot of activities and they have a lot of things geared that way, maybe that helps you attract the clientele that you want as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have kids, you have kids. If you take your kids somewhere and they feel safe and they were entertained and you didn't feel like you had to do all the entertaining, that is a place I
Yeah.
would take my kid back to again. So, that's kind of the thing is like if you feel like your kid was safe and they had a good time and they say, Mom, I want to go back there, that's something I'd heavily
Yeah.
consider versus one where I, spent the similar money, but, was trying to come up with something on my own. I find kids, especially if you like the family environment, are a big driver for that. Like, if the kid likes it, the parent's gonna think about coming back again, and that hasn't changed. When I was 9 years old and we had the first campground, there were some kids who I befriended whose family came back every summer, and part of it was because we had such a fun time hanging out as kids. So I think that's definitely a big element of it. But again, it has to be something you like. I say the best part about the outdoor hospitality industry is your campground can be what you want it to be, right? So, like, I have a client who loves horses. So, she has a whole equine part to her campground where people can bring their horses and they ride horse
Yep.
trails and stuff. I know nothing about horses. If you told me to add an equine thing, I would do a miserable job because I have no idea how that works or anything about a horse. And I don't have
Yep.
to. That just means that's not the type of guest I'm targeting. So I
But
think that
doesn't that
trying to be what works for you is good.
Yeah.
doesn't that mean increased liability with, what's the word when a swimming pool in the neighbor's yard? Attractive nuisance.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of attractive nuisances, though. I mean, that could be anything. If I leave a bunch of tiled decks, from on an area and it looks like a cool climbing tower and it's somewhere near kids, and that could be an attractive nuisance. Like there's plenty of pieces, but that's also why I say that there's a magic recipe for liability and it's paperwork. So I start with putting things together, the rules, letting people know, making sure they're aware. The second part is like enforcement of those policies. So I have rules that I actually enforce. Don't have a rule if you're not going to enforce it. And then the third piece is like there actually should be repercussions. Like if I say, hey, don't do that, and I just keep saying, hey, don't do that, and nothing ever happens, there's no weight behind that. So, doing all of those things together should be helpful. And no known hazards. Like if I come and tell you that, there's a part of your campground, I don't know, your playground, that every time someone puts their hand on the slide, it gets sliced open and you choose to ignore it and pretend it's not happening, yeah, okay, you've totally increased your liability there. Like there's no willful ignorance for the law. So kind of all those together is how you combat that. But I mean, I say part of this is why you have insurance. Like there's no way people, if they're going to sue, some people are going to sue. So lessening the amount they'd recover or the length of the lawsuit you get embroiled in, that's your job. But preventing people from ever threatening to sue you, that's literally never going to happen. So
Yeah.
it's a balance.
Well, we have to get wrapping up here pretty soon. I did want to ask, I've been asking, everybody, especially park owners who have been on the show, we've been asking just real quickly their thoughts on the current rate situation in the industry. Obviously, if you get on the campers Facebook pages, there's a lot of complaining about rates going up. And obviously that's for a variety of different reasons, from park owners expanding and needing to share the cost and utility costs and just the cost of everything's gone up. I guess, Christine, what's your thoughts on, is the industry going to get to a point where it starts scaring away people if prices keep going up, or do you think it's going to kind of stabilize? I know the quick answer is there's a park for everyone, so you can always find a
Sure.
cheaper park somewhere. But I guess is that even going away to some degree or not?
I don't know. I mean, I still think that people are willing to pay the the get what you pay for thing. I think is how people feel about a lot. So if they feel like they're
Yeah,
still getting value, they're willing to pay an increase. And I also think it's the kind of customers you're pulling. So yeah, I mean, some customers, as you morph and change into something else, might be like, I'm not paying that kind of money, but that might mean
yeah,
that's not the customer you're targeting anymore, right? So I think being intentional about it makes sense.
yeah,
And just kind of realizing, I mean, it's the old conversation, like if I sell 100 of these at $2, or do I sell two of these at $200? Like, I've still come out ahead. So
yeah,
perhaps there's some of that thinking about it. I mean, if you could make a ton of money just on your Friday through Sunday business, then you're not so worried if your weeks are slow because you're filling up every weekend, and that's okay. So I think it's kind of figuring out what your economic targets are and being responsive to that. And I just think the economy in general is a little wishy-washy. It happens during an election cycle. I'm going to be honest. People get very hesitant about where they're like, well, depending on who's president, who knows what's going to happen. So I think that once that question kind of goes away, we'll stabilize again a little bit, because people will think, for better or worse, that we have some idea where things are going. So then
hmm
I think that that will be helpful. And I think that as I've, you've heard, these are the buzzwords. I think dynamic pricing is really the thing that's showing up in every industry. I mean, Wendy's got all that pushback for them talking about peak menu pricing versus non-peak menu pricing. But I do think there's something to be said for that. I mean, trains, airplanes, hotels have always fluctuated their price based on demand. And I think that campgrounds now, with the help of all these softwares and stuff like that, adapting those kind of things. Hey, I'm slower. It's a week out. I'll drop the rate. I think will be more helpful than us just keeping this static. It's always $50 no matter what's happening type of thing. So I think us being responsive is where the change is, and that it will probably stabilize more in the future when people feel more certain about the economy at large.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Christine, you certainly
Well,
bring a degree of expertise from both sides of it. And, you'd never think that running a campground would necessitate as much legal discussion as it does right now, with people being very suing conscious. And, you tripped on this, and my kid fell on the pool. And even though the kid was running around the pool at 25 miles an hour when it was closed, um, it's a whole new ballgame in the industry.
There's something. Litigation's not going anywhere, unfortunately, for most people, but I guess it keeps me employed. So there's that.
sorry guys, I just got a text from my wife. So, we're during the show, but we're wrapping up. It's always great to hear from you, Christine, and I'm sure I'll see you at some conferences this fall. I know I'm going out to the glamping show, so
Yeah,
you've been out there a couple of years,
that's right.
and maybe you'll bring the baby.
We'll see. I'm
Anything?
bringing one of the kids. I haven't
You're bringing
decided
one of the
which one
kids.
I am.
Okay,
So
which one?
you'll
You
see
should bring.
one of
You
them.
should make it extra fun and bring both.
No.
So no, no.
And
Uh,
Ben will babysit.
how do
Ben will
yeah,
babysit while you
yeah,
go out.
how babies. How do people get in contact with you if they have any questions? I guess.
Sure. So emails are usually the best, especially because I have no idea. I'll just give you our general email for the law firm because I think it's easier to remember. It's just info, at town, TOWNE, law, LAW.com. So info@townlaw.com. And that's town
Okay.
with an E. And that's the easiest way to try to get a hold of somebody here, based on time zones and the like.
Yes, and we also, you write a column for us every once in a while. We have, if you go to our search bar on our website and type in Christine Taylor, her columns will pop up, and just a variety of different topics. I know you wrote on some really fun stuff like the Corporate Transparency Act.
Oh, yes, it's,
That's
bedtime
riveting.
reading.
Yeah, if you're up late at night and you're like, boy, I really need to read something, pull out that column. But she does some really great writing. It's really important stuff. So great stuff for park owners. So thanks, Christine, for being on the show. And thanks, everyone, for watching. And we will be back again next week.
Thank you for listening to WCM's Park Update, a production of Woodall's Campground magazine. Join us for a new show each Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for daily news and updates, and subscribe to our news feed on our website at woodallscm.com.